Good afternoon, this is the Iceman John Bailey. I wanted to do another Iceman series segment on 4 different phases of the season. I want to start back off with opening day. What I always do, first of all, I go according to what's been working from day one. But what I do is, like I said, I have my food plot set out. And where I put my food plots at, I always put them in an area where it's kind of secluded. I don't put them out in the opening where bucks will come in in a nocturnal situation. I always put them, in some cases, right in the middle of the property, near a creek bottom, where a funnel connects to a creek bottom, or a cutover, a pinch point connects to a creek bottom. But that food plot has to be in an area where that buck is going to be visiting that spot during the day. Also, I put in a mineral site, and also in some areas near that food plot, I put a bait station. And I've been putting bait stations out along with food plots for at least 20-25 years. But what I also do, I make sure that the game warden know exactly where my bait stations are. Some guys may not think that's a good idea, but to keep it legal, I always make sure the game wardens in every county, state, wherever I hunt, if it's legal, to put it there, but not hunt over it. But I make sure I I make sure I let them game wardens know exactly where my bait stations are, so it won't be no issues. But I put the bait stations out around March, and I put the minerals out around March to help the fawns, the does, and the bucks develop their full potential. And not only that, I make sure that the food plots are very plentiful. Sometimes I put out brassica, clover, I put out turnips, and I put out mostly Antler King products. Sometimes chicory, winter peas, just different things like that, just to figure out what they want. But the past few years, they've been really liking the turnips, and sometimes they like beets, but they've really been liking the turnips, because the turnips, they come up and they eat the leaves, and then when it gets really bad, when the weather gets really bad, they pull the turnips up and eat the turnips, because turnips, it gives them nutrients and protein and everything that they need to help get them through the winter. But and like I said, the bait stations, I use those. Put corn, soybeans. I put millet, just different things. It's a mixture. Sunflower seeds. It's a mixture that I put out. And also I put out just cow licks, the mineral brown cow licks, and they love those, because years ago I used to put out trophy rocks, but in all of my areas the deer just don't pay no attention to the trophy rocks, so I stopped putting them out, and I started putting out those brown cow licks, and they just love them, and it really helps them out. It doesn't give them as many proteins and fat and minerals that they need for antler growth and body weight, but it helps a little bit. But I use Antler King supplementary feeding as well to help build them up and help keep them built up, mainly when they're going towards the rut. But that's what I do mainly with those, and I do during the early season setup. But also when I get closer to opening day, I make sure that I have my shooting lanes cut. I make sure I have my walking lanes cut. Yeah, I cut my walking lanes about 4 feet wide, just for me to get through it with my tree stand, my bulb and everything, so I won't touch anything. Because early season you be sweating and everything, so you don't want to touch anything when you go into the stand. You want to try to keep the leaves back where your walking trail is, even though when you go in to check your camera or go in and check your setup, if you have leaves in there, take a leaf blower or a rake. But me personally, I take a rake, and I just rake the leaves back to keep them back, so when I'm walking to that stand on opening day or early season, I'm not making any noise. and I try to really do that all season long. Okay, we get to my pre-rut setup. During my pre-rut setup, that's the second phase of the season for me. I focus on funnels. I focus on pinch points. I focus on creek bottoms. Reason being is a buck, what they do is they already know exactly where their travel routes are because they've been using them traditionally year after year. So I'll look for fresh rubs because around, I want to say around September, the first week of September or the last week of August, the older bucks here in Georgia, they tend to rub their velvet. The younger bucks, they rub their velvet the second, the third week, sometime the fourth week of September. But I know the mature bucks, like I said, towards the end of August through the first week of September, you don't even see those bucks because they didn't went off and rub their velvet off. And when they do that, their pattern completely changes. So you have to understand that a buck, just because you see him on camera during the summer, spring and summer, then all of a sudden you don't see him no more. And then when you see him again, probably 2 weeks to 3 weeks later, if that, you'll start seeing nocturnal pictures. Because bucks, when they rub their velvet off, everything changes in their body. The testosterone starts to change. Their mindset starts to change because when they have that velvet on, they're more so in a development stage mode where they're just focused on getting them antlers to grow, and their chemicals and everything is focused more on antler growth, body weight, just different things like that. And they just like a feeding pattern, almost like a robot, a feeding pattern, sleeping, feeding. They're not worried about nothing else but growing those antlers and body weight and getting ready for the rut. But once they get rid of that velvet, then they go into like a Terminator mode, where they're just ready to fight and ready to love on them girls. So that's when I learned how to figure out, okay, what do these bucks want? What do they need? Where are they gonna go? How can I ambush them? So like I said, what I do during that pre-rut, I look at funnels. I focus a lot on funnels, focus a lot on creek bottoms, because bucks, what they like to do, they'll have a real thin strip, a real thin path. Sometimes you have brush above my head or above their head, where they can slip right through that brush. In between that brush, it's a small path in between that brush, and you'll never see them. So you have to learn how to identify paths like that. Also escape routes, where I've found escape routes over the years. I really didn't know what they were until I started hunting near a creek bottom, and then I would see bucks slip behind me and go right down these paths, but really they're being chased by like coyotes or things like that, and then they just slip through that escape route, and sometimes that escape route has briars and everything mixed with it, where it's almost impenetrable for anything to get through it without having to burrow their way through it. But in some cases, it's a real narrow spot where right at the edge of the escape route, and then once you climb down in there on your knees and get through it, then it opens up a little bit, but it's real faint. But it's a path where bucks use when they're in danger. So I focus on areas like pinch points, creek bottoms, even streams, ponds, or even a small water puddle. Because in some cases, if you find yourself a water puddle in the middle of your property, focus on that spot. Mainly if you have a lot of tracks around that little water puddle, because if there's no other water around that spot, I mean, a puddle can be the size of a basketball. But if it's always water there, pay attention to that, because a lot of times during early season, this is what I'm talking about, during early season, a buck will visit that spot and just stay there and drink a little while, and then he's gone. And that's another good spot to ambush, is when you during early season when it's hot and you have that buck walking through there. But another telltale sign for that is if you have just a faint trail near that water spot coming into it, then you pretty much know that it's a buck on there. But if it's a worn down trail, for the most part, it's does walking down that trail, because a buck, I don't know how they do it, but they have a real faint trail where they walk down the trail and then they come into food source, water source, or whatever. But a doe or several does, they just beat that path down over and over again. It's almost like they don't care. But a buck, they're like, okay, I want to be as elusive as I can, and they just tend to have a real faint trail. In a lot of cases, it's right next to a doe trail on the left or the right. But most of the times, a buck's trail is going to be closer to the thicket than a doe's trail will be. I have no idea. They're just, I guess, more skittish. But that's just what I found. Okay. Like I said, once I focus on those funnels, during that pre-rut, or going into the pre-rut, should I say, a lot of bucks, they get to the point where they start cruising around October 15th. They start walking around a little more. But between, should I say, the first week or the third week of September through like the second week of October, like they call that the October lull, where bucks just, you don't see them. But the reason why you don't see a lot of bucks is because a lot of them are just feeding on acorns. And when those acorns start to drop, those bucks, they just hunker down into one area. They don't move much, because first of all, it's still warm. They don't move much, so they just gobble up the acorns, put them in their stomach, go somewhere in a spot. A lot of times they'll find a blowdown, or they'll find a high ridge where they lay on their ridge or lay by that blowdown, and they'll regurgitate, and then they'll eat them. It's kind of strange on how they do, but that's nature. But and then the guys, they hunt funnels or they'll hunt certain areas and they never see the buck, because that buck found that big old oak, and he stays around that oak, and he eats and he eats, and he goes off to his little spot. They'll lay down, regurgitate, and eat, and just lay there. And then he knows where his water is. His water, in some cases, it isn't far away, so he just stays in that one little area and just goes back and forth and don't move much. That's why a lot of guys don't ever see deer, because they hunt the same technique early season than they do going into the pre-rut. But you have to make some adjustments. You have to find out, okay, where these big oaks are. A lot of guys do find big oaks and they hunt them. Some guys take binoculars and they look up in the oaks and see, okay, what does the crop look like? And if it's a big crop, then they try to hunt that area. And also, if you find white oaks, red oaks, or whatever state you live in, look for deer sign. Look for a lot of droppings. If you got a lot of droppings, mainly old droppings, because in some cases that deer has been there last year and the droppings are still there, but they're real old. But if you find a lot of real old, a lot of concentration of old droppings, I would try to hunt that location. In other cases, look around to see if you see an old wooden stand that's all beat up and torn down, just hanging there. That's another sign of, say, hey, somebody been here hunting years ago, so let me take a look and see why they had that stand here. I found a spot one time where I seen an old ladder stand. It was all beat up, but I kept looking around and I was like, well, why are they hunting here? I looked at the location, didn't find much of anything until I looked up. I seen a big old persimmon tree behind me. I said, oh, telltale sign. So pay attention to terrain. If a buck can find a spot, a real thin layer of brush that he can walk through, if he find a funnel, if he find a pinch point, if he find a briar, like a briar thicket on the backside of a cut over, anything that he can hide himself, pay attention to things like that, because it's easy to miss sign like that, and then you won't be as successful when you're just hunting in an open set of woods. It's good to just sit in the woods. In some cases, I call it a crow's nest. If you don't understand the woods, what you can do is just get up, just climb the tree. Just climb the tree in the middle of the woods. Just climb the tree and just sit up there. Get up there about 20 feet and just sit there. And that could be like your observation point, because in some cases, if you just sit there long enough, you might see a series of deer walking off to your right, going down the creek, going down through a funnel. I mean, over and over again. And that's another form of scouting too. If you don't really know how to find sign, just get in the middle of the woods, climb up, and get up there, like I said, about 20-25 feet if you can get that high, because you don't want to, you don't want them to bust you. You don't want them to smell you. So if you get up there, you can actually just sit there and listen, and sit there and look around. Don't do a whole lot of moving, but sit there and listen, look around, and you'd be surprised what you can learn by deer using certain parts of the woods, because deer don't use all parts of that woods. People think, oh, deer are everywhere. No, I'm just assuming, and I think the scientists did say deer only use like 10% of the woods. They don't use the whole entire set of the woods. Only if they get spooked, they'll run through it. But for the most part, they use a spot where they're comfortable at. So once you get up in those woods and you find out, okay, you get up in that stand, if you're not familiar on how to scout, just climb that stand and just sit there. Like I said, sit there and look. I know I'm repeating myself, but sit there and look, and you see deer off to the right, to the left, behind you, in front of you, whatever, and you be like, okay, they're using that spot there, and you see them going back and forth 3 or 4 days in a row. And then put yourself a bait station over there, or put yourself a mineral block over there with a camera, and try to see what kind of deer it is. If you can't determine on what kind of buck it is, put a camera over there, and then go from there. But going right there into the pre-rut, that's around about October 22nd in that area. Around about, I should have said October 20th. What I normally do, I find a scrape. I call it a social scrape, and a social scrape is where you have 2 or 3 trails going into a scrape. I call that a social scrape, and to me that's a piece of gold, because what I would do, I would hang a dripper, and I would put my intruder alert or my dragon estrus, either one. But the intruder alert would be better during the pre-rut, because it has young buck urine and estrus in it. And I would hang that there round about the 22nd of October. But on the 20th, what I would do, when I find a scrape like that, or even a scrape, if you don't find a social scrape, if you just got one scrape where you got a trail going past it and a licking branch, make sure that licking branch is broke. If it's not broke, take a pair of pliers and just break it in half and just let it dangle. And then around about October the 20th, what I'll do is I'll spray a couple squirts of my intruder alert in that scrape and just leave it alone. But I'll have a camera. I'll make sure I pick the right tree, and I have a blackout camera. I don't like to put LED cameras, because some bucks spook, and does are spooked with LED cameras. So I put blackout cameras on those scrapes about 15 to 20 yards away, and see what kind of bucks and does I got coming through there. But around about October 22nd, what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll hang that dripper, and I'll just hang it there and just leave that camera alone for about a week, and then I'll go back and check it out and see what I got hitting it. If nothing is hitting it, what I'll do, instead of putting the intruder alert, I'll go back and I'll put the estrus. I'll just change it out and put the estrus in there and check that out. And in a lot of cases, bucks they'll start funneling through that more, because right up to, I want to say, the 27th through the November the 1st, the older does, they might come into estrus. One or the other might come into estrus for 24 hours. So that buck is assuming that a doe is coming into estrus, so he's going to be visiting that area more frequently. So what I do, I get off from that scrape about 50 yards downwind, and I'll set up high on right in parallel and adjacent to that scrape. And so what that buck will normally do, he'll put his nose up, even if he's 100 yards away, and he'll scent check that spot. And I'll try to beat his nose by being higher than him, because I like to hunt about 22 to 25 feet. So I try to beat his nose, and hopefully he'll come in past me 30 yards, 20 yards, and give me an opportunity. But in other cases, he'll come from the opposite direction if the wind changes. But to me, it's been working like 50% of the time for me, because like I said, that's why they call it hunting. There's no perfect hunt, but I have learned over the years on how to get in front of that buck, because if I find a blowdown or if I find a thicket, I try to put my stand near that blowdown or near that thicket to kind of corral him around me, one way or the other. You see what I'm saying? And that will give me an opportunity to get myself ready to draw and have that opportunity. But I don't never try to put my stand in a spot where a buck can come right there directly underneath me and bust me. So I always try to find a spot. In some cases you can't, but I always try to find me a spot where I got something that's going to be causing him to funnel around me, so I won't get busted in most cases, because I don't know what they do. They have that sixth sense where they just stop at the base of your tree and look up. And then and also what I also do, I'll put brush underneath of my climber, because I use mostly climbers. I put brush on the side of my climbers, behind my climbers, and underneath of my foot portion on my climber. And so when he look up, I'm gonna be broke up because I got brush around me. I had to learn that too, because I've been busted by quite a few bucks over the years. They just say, I don't know what he is, so they just run off or blow a couple of times. But anyway, okay, that like I said, that pre-rut, I love that time. It's a short window. It's a really short window. It's only like a 4-day window. When you're talking about the 28th through the 1st, where those older does might come into estrus for 24 hours and boom, they out. But that's a really good time to get a buck. Like I said, back in 2000, that's when I got my double drop time, right here on this property here where I hunt. Back in 2000, I mean, right over here had a buck. He was running 3 does over here, and I just got up the woods. I just got up the stand, and I was only up in that stand for 45 minutes. And he just came through, and the hunt was over. I was like, wow. I had no idea it was a double drop time until I walked up on him, because the canopy was dark and his antlers were dark, and I couldn't see the drops. But if I had saw the drops, I might have choked myself out of the tree. So, okay, going to my rut tactic. How I hunt the third phase, which is the rut. To me, it's just as simple as simple can be. I find doe bedding areas. I don't look for buck bedding areas. I find a doe bedding area. And for the most part, during a rut, a buck, he won't go to his area that much during a rut. He's going to go to a doe bedding area. And what he's going to do right now is he's going to search for the girls. So I hunt the does during a rut. I don't hunt the bucks. And I've been doing that for 15 years after it started clicking. I said, okay, if I want a girl, I got to go hunt for a girl. So I started going and figuring out what a doe bedding area is. A doe bedding area, for the most part, is similar to a buck bedding area, but it's not. It doesn't have high ridges like buck. Buck has high ridges, blowdowns, things like that. but they have thickets. They have little small pockets of thickets. They have little open areas where a doe can see. But they also have some blowdowns in it. Just a mixture of different trees near creeks and definitely near food. But once I figured out what a doe bedding area is, I started hunting them during the rut. And I'm telling you, my efficiency and success rate just went up. I want to say to 100%. Because when you hunt that doe bedding area, and if you don't have a scrape near the doe bedding area, make yourself a mock scrape. So what I would do, if I don't have a scrape near that doe bedding area, I would make a mock scrape and I would hang me another dripper. I would put up, I would just put up estrus, my dragon estrus. I would put that in the dripper, put a camera on it, and also I would put wicks out. And in some cases, I would hang a wick underneath of the dripper, just let it keep constantly saturating that dripper. I'm sorry, let that dripper keep saturating that wick rather. And I'm gonna tell you, bucks, man, they come in all night long because I have a wireless camera out and it sends pictures to my phone and my computers, and I just get so excited about that. But I would have bucks come in bumping does because they got the nose up in the air, and in some cases you can't even see that buck when he's scent checking because he's behind a tree or in a thicket, but he still put that nose up, and if that wind is right and it's gonna hit, that estrus is gonna hit him in his nose and he's gonna keep coming. He's not as skittish as he is in early season, so he's just gonna keep coming. He's gonna walk right through just about everything that he can get through just to get to that doe. So I harvest, I want to say 10 bucks with that tactic, just hunting does. I don't hunt bucks. And I'm gonna tell you, that tactic to me is my best tactic, where I just set on about, I want to say 40 yards, 30 to 40 yards away from that doe bedding area, and I pick my spot, and I know where bucks are gonna come through, mainly a funnel. I pick my spot and I just get up that tree, and I'll face parallel to the bedding area, and because I can look to my left and look to my right, and in some cases I can turn around, look behind me, and look out front. But I always want to have that bedding area to my left or to my right, so I can actually turn and if I get an opportunity. But I'm gonna tell you that tactic there, it really helps me when I find a doe bedding area. That's exactly what I hunt, and I'm telling you, those bucks, they show up eventually. And like I said, doe bedding area and dripper, and in some cases I use a drag rag, but in most cases I just use a dripper. But if I don't have a doe bedding area, if that's when I go, in a lot of cases I go to using my drag rag with my dragon estrus, and I'll get out and walk a couple hundred yards from my truck, and I start my drag next to a funnel, next to a cutover, next to a pinch point, somewhere where I see a nice trail going into a thicket, coming out of a thicket. I'll put a drag rag right there and drag up near my stand, and I'll make a loop around my stand. I don't go directly to my stand. I'll start making a circle about 10 yards from my stand, going around my stand, and then I'll stop probably like I want to say a 2 o'clock position. Then I hang it. I don't keep going around that stand, because if I keep going around, he's gonna do a constant circle. So once I stop, and when that trail stops, he's gonna stop. So that's my tactic for that. I got a whole lot more tactics, but I want to leave that one there. To me, that's a simple tactic to use. Like I said, it's been working for me. I've harvested 10 bucks using that tactic, hunting doe bedding areas over the years, and I'm telling you, it works really good. Okay, going to the fourth phase, that's that post-rut. The post-rut to me is just as sweet as the rut, if you know how to hunt it. To me, it's always similar to like 28 to 30 days after the pre-rut. I'm sorry, after the peak of the rut. In other cases, it's cold and windy and sometimes sleet and rain. But if you want to get out there and get them, if it goes back to like an early season and a rut combination setup, where the does are gonna go back to feeding more. The bucks gonna be feeding more. They're not gonna be chasing. They're gonna be walking and cruising, but they're gonna need something to eat because they don't have any energy. The body, they lost a lot of body weight, and also you have to take into consideration. You have to know which buck that you have on your property, and then in a lot of other cases, the bucks that come on your property may be from neighboring properties 5 miles away, whatever, because they had already bred their does over where they live at in their core area. So they'll leave their core area and come over to your spot looking for does. So that buck might have a big rack and little body, and you thinking he's a 3-year-old buck. But take into consideration, look at his face, look at his neck. He's still going to have that neck, but his body weight is going to shrink a lot. And you might think he's a 3-year-old buck, and you might let him walk. But look at the antler size. Look at the mass. If he has mass, and like I said, that neck, it's going to be bigger, but it's going to lose a little bit of weight, but his body is going to lose more weight. But look at that neck. Look at that. Look at the overall deer. Look at the length of the deer. Look at that head, and you could pretty much determine if he's a mature buck or not. But don't get discouraged if you see that he's had lost body weight, because I harvested a buck last year where I knew which buck that was, and I ended up getting him November 24th. But he ended up having he lost a lot of weight because he was running and chasing does. But like I said, I knew which buck he was. But hunt them food plots. Still use your estrus during the post-rut, because I'm telling you, I had a buck come into me, gave me a 5-yard shot one year. I used my estrus. It was sleeting, and he came up right underneath the tree and gave me a 5-yard shot. But don't be afraid to use them scents. Hunt food plots. Most of the acorns are going to be gone. They might be funneling through, pecking every now and then, but you know, squirrels, chipmunks, everything that eats acorns just like the deer, they're going to all get in there and they're going to gobble them up. But if you got food plots like turnips, where it's going to be, them turnips are going to still be there for the most part if it's snow on the ground, or if it's just late in the season. Deer are going to focus more on stuff like that to help fatten them up for the winter. Not only that, even like I said, if you still have minerals out, most likely they're not going to touch the minerals. But like I said, food plots is to me is a key thing to sit on. And even if you have a scrape near a food plot, I wouldn't hesitate on putting either a dripper there or just spray into that scent. Spray into that scrape, and just hunt that area for a while, especially late season, because like I said, you're gonna have deer that's gonna feed in that location, and if you got does in that location, I'm gonna tell you, a buck is gonna eventually come out there and start checking them out. So don't hesitate to try that. So I hope that helped you. I know I've rambled on and everything, but when I get excited about hunting, that's what I do. But I hope that helped you, and I hope you guys have a successful season. And like I said, don't forget to wear that safety harness, and be a good steward over the land, and God will always bless you. Iceman signing out. And also visit me at my website at www.theicemanseries.com, and also you can visit me on YouTube, the Iceman Series. I have quite a few videos on there that hopefully it can help somebody. I do this for free. I don't ask for money to do videos because I really like to help people. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and conclude this. I hope this helped you. Y'all have a safe and successful season. Iceman Series, signing out. God bless you.